Curtis made about Prince saying that he was checking out something that you had said that Curtis he wasn't no Curtis Mayfield, and they were saying that his estate just actually put out his new album. Well, we be putting it out, Welcome to America, and he dedicated this song to you. Can you tell us about that?
For real?
Yeah, no, that's very real. No, Prince and I spent good time together. We were on a plane one time going to the Jazz Montreal show where he was performing. And he said, I heard you gave this lecture. And you said, I love my brother Prince. Prince is on my third album, Never Forget. We did a song together. And I said, you a genius, you a giant, but you ain't no Curtis Mayfield, man. And he said, really? He said, yeah, but I didn't know. He went in the studio and did that Welcome to America album that's coming out next month. And Born to Die, he just dropped a few weeks ago. And I listened to it. I said, ooh, got a little Superfly vibe to it. Got a little Curtis Mayfield vibe to it.
Man, you've taken a lot of positions, Dr. West. You've said a lot of controversial things, but I think that might be the most gangster thing you've ever done. You're telling Prince to his face that he's no Curtis Mayfield.
He's a bad dude, man.
Are you crazy? You a bad dude right there. I was
saying this. Curtis Mayfield, right? I'm so proud when he's 15, the Gypsy Woman when he's 14, and he and Jerry Butler working on Precious Love at 19. And I mean, we can go on and on. We a winner 21. It's Choice of Colors when he's 20 and never won no Grammy, but Milli Vanilli won 2. Forget the Grammy. He's a giant. We don't live without Curtis Mayfield, man. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
New World Order with Roger Troutman written it. He writes it being paralyzed from his neck down. Y'all know the story?
That's right.
And Roger come in with the computer love man, working together across generations. Curtis, a genius. Roger, great talent from Ohio, bringing the young and the old together. Curtis is just beyond description, man. We won't get started on Curtis Mayfield, man. Lord have mercy. So that's what I meant with Prince. And I told Prince, I say, brother, what were you doing at 14? How can you write I'm so proud when you're 14 years old? You don't even know what's going on. You don't know what love really is. Oh, really?
And hardly anybody knows about that. Because not only was radical reconstruction defeated, but even the history of what happened to that in that period has been eradicated. And then I was also thinking about a time I myself experienced in the aftermath of the Attica Rebellion, when we were seriously talking about the abolition of prisons. And it really did appear as if we were moving in a radical direction. And then, of course, because of the ways in which the established, political forces and the capitalists began to influence what was going on, that was turned around, and the pendulum began to swing back in the regressive direction. And that's why I think that now we do have the opportunity to prevent the reversal of where we were headed, and why the campaign to stop Cop City is so important, because I see that as one of the efforts to turn around the possibilities that were revealed in the summer of 2020. When it became clear that vast numbers of people were beginning to understand the nature of structural racism. And of course, the police and the whole carceral system represent the most dramatic manifestations of structural racism. And so now we see the DeSantis's and all of those right-wing folks who are trying to prevent white children, especially white children, from learning about the moment.
Talk about how we can better harness our buying power or our dollars. And I'm thinking that we need to have a general strike. We need to pull out. we need to stay away from, as opposed to spending money in a targeted manner. How about we not spend? So that's why I wanted to talk with you today and couch this around the language of a general strike. But basically giving you all of that background.
We're using different terminology because a strike doesn't have to do with spending in my book, right? And so just so that we know, that's just.
Well, I guess I'm talking about a boycott. I guess I'm talking basically a boycott.
And I've got a couple things to say about that. So I'm going to try to go quick, but
yes, sir. Yes.
So when I was first getting radicalized, one of the things I did was get involved in the in helping to organize farm workers in the Central California Valley, right? And it was a group called the Anti-Racist Farm Workers Union. So I was in Delano and McFarland, right? Wasco, stuff like that, right? And these folks were a group of folks who were students in Mexico in '68 and had survived the massacre that happened there, right? And instead of what happens to some folks that are fleeing repression, they go to another country and they kind of hide out. They were like, well, no, if we're going to the US, we want to go where we can still help make the revolution happen. So the first thing that they did was they joined the UFW, right? They moved to California, joined the UFW. And the UFW at the time, I want to preface this by saying UFW does not have these same politics and has gone through a transformation since then. But at the time, and they, at the time, they, joined under Cesar Chavez, and Cesar Chavez, they were working against undocumented workers. They were totally against them, calling them derogatory racist names, and not only publishing that in their newspapers, but helping immigration officers to deport people.
You can't just, everything's not going to come. Like you said, you had to politicize certain artists. And we've done that along the way, because there's certain artists that, now who, they move on the right side of things. But at first, there's a lot of confusion out here. So just because someone is considered quote unquote conscious doesn't mean that, that they have politics. You know what I mean? They might just be vegan and don't curse. You know what I'm saying? That's
well, it really got. I remember we had this is probably too much yapping, but
it's all good.
Little anecdote.
I remember it took you a while. Go ahead.
I don't like doing this kind of stuff. I'm not a forward facing. Anyway, but that had nothing to do with your show.
Okay, all right. That was
yeah, it had nothing to do with your show. You might see it seems like I'm saying yes to a bunch of stuff, but I'm usually saying no. I just don't. I feel like I want the work to lead, not me or whatever. But anyway, what I was about to say is Fat Joe, just around that political education people. First, we thought we was gonna have to hypnotize him because he was scared. He had a plane thing, and he was like, one of the banner was like, so we had actually paid for hypnosis.
Mr. T, right? Yeah.
But then, and Fat Joe's Puerto Rican, but being in the Latino community, he wasn't sure. He had an anti-Castro framework.
Right.
And so, and later, of course, Pitbull certainly has one. That I'm not saying that's dying out because generations pass it on. Like, Miami Cubans used to be my least favorite genre of folks, right? You know what I mean? You just go down there and get into these like protracted arguments. I've grown. I'm not having those arguments with folks. They have a right to their political beliefs. It's usually like embedded in their families and stuff. And I know that I don't have the whole story either on a place that I'm not from, but you would just ask the question like, well, how did your grandmother feel about Batista? And it would just derail it. It was just like, Right. But anyway, so Fat Joe, I remember, so it wasn't like we was giving him like a pro-Castro political education, but we were talking to him about well, first of all, how Fidel had given not just political refuge to our sister Asada down there, but had given her asylum, which is
Right.
an official status, which isn't what Huey and a lot of other people got when they were down there. But so, that kind of, that kind of like layering on, like accepting Fat Joe, like it wasn't like he had done a deep dive. He was just taught, like so many Americans are, particularly Latinos, to have just an anti-Castro kind of like framework. And when we went down to Cuba and when we were producing the Black August concerts down there, because I was a part of it, we would do, I don't know how we got, I guess we talk about Black August because it's Black August, but
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, we here.
But we would do a concert in New York, and then the other half would be like we would go to Cuba, and there was already an existing hip hop concert down there. Pablo Herrera, like a lot of like comrades that we work with, would invite us, and we would bring Kweli and Mos, or we would bring Dead Prez, and they would perform. But they already had their own scene that was so beautiful. It was all these intergender, like mixed groups, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, it was just dope. When I know I went a little viral with this comment about hip hop isn't revolutionary.
The worst thing you can have is a well-meaning person with influence and power that don't know shit, or got the wrong information. And I mean that's sometimes the most dangerous thing you can have, man. But that's neither here nor there.
So listen, just real quick, because I know we gotta wrap up here. But I did want to just give you a quick comment on you mentioned your connections and being in the Green Party. What are you thinking about Cornel West and the campaign and all of that?
That's a great question. I am always. Let me take a step back. I'm going to answer that question, but I want to take a step back and say, I believe that we need alternative options at all times, and I believe that the pressure that has to be applied has to happen from the Green Party, has to happen from other third parties, and also has to happen, not primarily, but also from folk inside the Democratic Party who are willing to primary Joe Biden and drag him to the left, or at least bring that conversation out. I actually don't have an issue with that conversation. I don't think our salvation is going to come from the Democratic Party. I don't think we can ultimately make the Democratic Party there, but as a tactic, I'm okay with it. I was surprised by Cornel's run. Just I didn't know it was going to happen. That's not a judgment. I just didn't know it was going to happen. The issues that he's raising, I mean, some of the stuff we've talked about today, Palestine, NATO, living wages, radical critiques of imperialism. These are things that have to be on the agenda. And so I am excited to hear those conversations be brought in public. I also noticed as his campaign has got traction, you're starting to see the hit pieces come from different news outlets. That's not a coincidence, not a conspiracy, but it ain't a coincidence. It's quite simply, that's what they do when you're winning. That's what you do when you're gaining traction. And winning doesn't mean Cornel has to win the nomination. That's never been what we've thought about as a Green Party, right? It's been about how do we build, not for this election, but how do we build momentum? How do we get a stake in national funds? But more importantly, how do we put these agenda items on the table so that the American people can be thinking about different questions and ask different questions and make different demands of politicians? Ultimately, I think we can defeat the Democratic Party. I know we can. That's a project though, and I think we have to be present every election to do it. Now there are people who very legitimately say, fascism is on the ticket right now. We shouldn't be having an abstract anti-fascist third party if DeSantis and Trump are running. We can't have
Cornel.
We can't have Cornel up there if we're losing Supreme Court seats, and more will be at stake, right? If only, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get blamed for endorsing Bill Stein in 2016. There's not a day that goes by that my mentions aren't in shambles because somebody tells me that suddenly I'm the most powerful Negro in the world. Me, Eddie, Claude, and a few other people because of our political stances in 2016. And I think that when you take that position, one, it's unnuanced and unsophisticated. Two, it lets Hillary Clinton off the hook for not having a campaign that actually met the needs of people. It's also empirically ridiculous, right? Everybody who voted Green wasn't going to vote for Hillary if Jill hadn't been on the ticket. Part of the reason they were voting green is because they didn't like what was on the ticket. And many of those people, if you look at the data, their second choice was Trump. They were like, we don't want Washington anymore. And that was the wrong choice, I would argue. But my point is Hillary wasn't getting nowhere. And it ain't because a few Negroes voted green or a few radicals voted green. It's because the Democratic Party has consistently failed to meet the needs or address the needs and concerns of the people. And until they do that, they're going to continue to lose elections. And so Cornel West at this moment, I've interviewed him on my show for an hour, and then we did another thing after he announced. And then I think it aired last week as well. You know, Cornel West is bringing those issues to the table, and I wish him luck in bringing those issues to the table. And I'm going to continue to amplify his voice as he does it. Do I have some concern and tension around what it means in November for Trump to be back in office? Yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you. That's a real concern of mine. But I think that there are tactical things we can do, whether it's vote trading, whether it's strategic balloting. We cannot afford to let Trump back in office. We cannot afford to have DeSantis back in office, but we also cannot afford to have year after year of empty liberalism.